So today my video is going to be about making kind of a rural village in Townscaper. Now Townscaper only allows you to create grassy areas if it's in the middle of a courtyard. So what I'm going to do is fill the whole base layer, the maximum area of the map, with one layer of pavement tiles, and then I will build a thin perimeter wall around the whole thing, which hopefully will fill immediately with grassy land. And then once I have that base layer, then I'm going to build a more normal town in the middle with farm buildings, town buildings, religious buildings, that kind of thing. I don't really have a plan for it yet, but that is kind of the direction I'm going in. This whole process of filling out one layer on the bottom of the map, I thought that it was going to take roughly 10 minutes, 20 minutes, but it ended up taking roughly 40 or 50 minutes. So definitely keep that in mind if you're planning on making something as ambitious as this. It definitely will require a pretty big time investment. I would say, and this is what I said in my last video as well, that if there was one thing I could change about this game, I would make it easier to plant just basic earth tiles. So not every tile has to be a building. I want a lot of my tiles just to form the landscape that the buildings are going to be placed on, at least for me, because I like making really large maps. And then as a result, you could have kind of more creative cliffs, hills, mountains, things like that, valleys. But as long as it took to make this map area, I think it's pretty soothing, especially when you watch it fast, seeing the tiles slowly take shape in order, going in these spirals and filling in these little gaps. I think it's kind of like visual ASMR a little bit. So here I'm starting the process of building the single layer of wall. I started out by making a yellow wall, but I realized pretty quickly that no walls that are out in rural areas or out in nature are yellow, just because there aren't really many natural yellow hard materials. I mean, there's sandstone, but nobody really is building walls, cheap walls that is sandstone. Where I'm from, in Connecticut, there are a lot of forests where there used to be farm fields that were run by the British and Dutch colonists. So there were a lot of stone walls that were put in place between people's properties, or just as a way of getting rocks out of the way, because the land in Connecticut is really, really rocky. And so as you drive through my town and you look into the forest, you'll see a lot of these stone walls going pretty long, random curves, random straight lines, corners that just used to be people's property lines. So after deleting the buildings that I had already, I placed this red tower right at the top of my map just to kind of signify north. I ended up not using it, but I thought that it would be helpful as a way of kind of knowing exactly where I was in the map and not getting confused, because even when I was making the last map, which had the river in it, I still ended up getting confused by what was what and what was where. And then right after that, I went straight into making the town hall. It was a little bit hard to envision a town hall just because I didn't know how big the area was going to be, the city, and it wouldn't make any sense for a rural area to have some gigantic town hall. So it had to be at the same time small, but also a significant landmark, a big, a thing that people would pay attention to when they visited. I tried a couple of things, tried making a big tower, tried kind of adding 2 turrets onto it, but no matter what I did, it either felt too big or didn't look like a town hall. So then after I made a couple buildings, I realized that my town would have no streets, because you can't build pavement in this game. You can only build either grass or the non-existence of houses, or you can have it just be all pavement. So you can't have grass with a paved area in the middle. So I deleted everything, deleted my town hall, deleted the few houses that I had, and I decided that what I wanted to do was create a river system instead of roads going through. Because if I couldn't create roads to get people from point A to point B, I could at least create kind of a cool system of canals or something. And the only way to do the canals is to build walls around any water body you have, because, as I mentioned earlier, all grass has to be totally covered on all sides by a wall. And so if you have a grassy area and you dig in the middle of it to make a river or to make a channel, then it'll erase the grassy area, because that suddenly becomes a border without a wall. I think that this is another way the game could probably improve if they allowed for the creation of rivers going through your grassy areas. It could make some really cool landscape features, particularly just rivers that actually look like real rivers. But because it's not a part of the game right now, I have to kind of make it a man-made thing. So I'm imagining that this is some kind of long-term engineering project where they wanted to get water out into these rural areas to get to get goods out to market. And so here I'm building kind of the perimeter of what I imagine the canal system will be. What I have is the canal going on one side into the ocean and then leading into the middle of the map, splitting into two halves, and then leading, kind of forking, with one side going to one half of the map and one side going to the other. Then I got to worry about actually making the channel itself, so deleting all of the tiles that are in the bottom of where the channel will be. I realized that the channel has to be at least 2 tiles wide, just because if it's 1 tile wide, the body of water that gets created is super thin, just because the game automatically adds kind of this coastal feature between the wall and the water. So it took a little bit, but I ultimately was able to get the whole channel dug out, and I think in the end it looked pretty good. What I wanted to do was have some kind of building connecting these channels to the farms or whatever was in the field regional area that needed to have goods get transported to the ocean or to the main river or wherever this output channel is going. And so I decided that what I wanted to do was create some kind of standardized building, like a standardized type of tower or gate or something. Maybe they're publicly run, maybe they're privately run, but they all look the same, and they're just the kind of the default way of getting things from the grassy area into the water itself. I was experimenting with a couple of different tower types, and then I ultimately decided on a tower that would be 2 tiles wide and 3 tiles tall. I built a couple of these around the area, and these would eventually become kind of the seeds for where the farms or the landscape features of my city would be. It's hard to really call it a city because it's just a rural area and kind of the middle of nowhere, but that is kind of what I was thinking. I decided to create a bridge across the river because I figured I wanted to have some kind of downtown area. Even in rural areas, there's a main street with a bunch of gas stations or the town hall or kind of the shops and things like that. And so I decided that I wanted that area to be in that kind of large area at the opening of the channel, and to get people to that area from the opposite side of the canal, there needed to be some kind of bridge going over. The good thing about the bridge too is it is pretty low over the water, but it will still allow like a barge or something to go through. Then, once I was done with the bridge, I had my first feature to build. And I figured I should just start with the most basic of basic, classic farm architecture, which is a barn, a big red barn. And those are pretty easy. I mean, I've built a lot of those before. You just build a triple wide single floor with a double height channel going down the middle. And then right next to the barn, I decided to build the house. House is just the most standard, most basic small house possible that at least has some interest. So I had 2 blocks in the bottom, 1 block in the top. And then right after that, I decided there had to be something else. I mean, I couldn't really think of what else would go on this ranch, farm, whatever you want to call it. But I figured it could maybe have some kind of meat processing center for where the livestock goes right before it's about to get loaded into the barges. I mean, the meat, not the livestock. So I decided to make kind of like a butchery building in this plum color right next to that tower. Next, I wanted to make a farm that was more conventional agriculture, so just like a corn farm or a wheat farm or something. I don't really know exactly what the architecture of that is supposed to look like, and so I kind of can vaguely think of a grain tower where grain gets loaded into, I think, a silo. So I decided to build something that kind of approximates that, going into the tower, the input tower that leads right into the channel. And then, so that's that kind of yellow building with a little bridge going across it. And then right next to it, I built another one of the basic farmhouses. Now, this game unfortunately, you can't really simulate a farm field, so I can really only build the buildings and kind of imagine that there are fields of corn or fields of grain and things like that. I can't actually build yellow fields to simulate the presence of something more interesting than just basically a courtyard. So now I'm going to switch over to the audio I recorded live. I think it's a little bit lower quality. I don't really know why that happens because I'm recording it with the same microphone and the same computer, but here it is. And then over here on this peninsula, maybe I could have like a fishery or something. Yeah, maybe, yeah, that's what this could be. This could be an area where both boats come through and they use it as a big pond for the fish to live in. I know that kind of makes, actually no, that makes no sense because you wouldn't want a boat going right through where all your fish are. So I'm going to make long channels. Let's see, it's pretty regular. It's kind of regular, okay. So I'll make long channels where there can kind of be an artificial fishery type of thing. So I started out making these channels, but I realized pretty quickly that they weren't looking great. They were really irregular. There wasn't any kind of central organization to the whole scheme, which I think there should have been. So I decided that I wanted one central building in the middle of all of these channels to kind of process all of the fish. And the connections to the ponds from the central building would be these piers kind of extending out in all directions. Or maybe I could make a link to the canal water. Yeah, that's what I should do. I can take down these walls. And that way this whole fishery area can be even bigger. And so to do that, to take down the walls and make the whole fishery area bigger, I had to build a wall across the entrance to it just to preserve the grass on the opposite side. And then once I built that wall, I decided that I wanted a big gate to the whole fishery area, a big blue gate to kind of match the blue aesthetic of the fishery. I built this big arch, which obviously can't have a direct road going actually through the arch because that would then destroy the grass. So I kind of made it a deeper building and then built it solid on the opposite side. Then I went ahead and started deleting the other walls. What that would do is it would make the fishery bigger, and these walls are not needed because they don't have to protect the courtyard on the interior of where the fishery is now, because now there's no grass that I want there. I'm okay with just having basically pavement piers. I decided that I wanted the fishery entrance to be by the town, not by kind of the other side, because I figured people in the town were going to be the ones working in the fishery and they're not going to be living on site. And so I decided to build a new gate and then delete the old gate. So then I built a road from the gate, which is basically just a bridge, to the main fishery processing building right at the center of the plant. Because it's industrial, it really doesn't have to look that good, so it's okay that it's got kind of an ugly shape and an ugly roof, big flat roof, because that's just basically a processing building. And then the bridge really doesn't need to be this big. I mean, it's just a bridge access point from the town. So it can be small. And then the door to the... Oh, interesting. Makes a wall there. I kind of want to minimize the amount of walls that I make in this game. So I'm going to make the bottom level of the bridge that brown color. Oh, jeez. Just so the game thinks it's one... Oh my gosh, I can't even do this for my life. Just so the game thinks it's basically one building. I think that I wanted to make an arch like this as kind of an entrance. And so even though it makes a roof and therefore makes it kind of less industrial, I guess that makes sense because maybe this is an older town. That's why the fishing apparatus is not as large. And so it's kind of got a more traditional building style. Okay. So if this area's got to be preserved for these farmers, oops, and that area's got to be preserved, I've left this central area. The audio here got really bad, so I'm just dubbing it over. Basically, I wanted to make like a saltwater pool on the right half of the fishery right here. So unlike the rest of the fishery, this part wouldn't be connected by water to the rest of the canals. I decided that I wanted, in order to kind of signify that this was a saltwater fishery, to build a little tower right in the middle, right on the tiny little spot in the center of that triangle. And so I'm thinking that that purple building can somehow regulate the salinity of the water or some kind of other environmental condition that's necessary for the saltwater fish. So after building the saltwater area, I decided that the rest of the fishery was kind of too hodgepodge and didn't really look like a unified typology for how these pools were made. So I deleted most of the piers and I rebuilt them so that they are kind of built more in an orderly design. And you have little docks going out from this main building so that each little mini sub pond, maybe for a different species of fish, is equally accessible. Cool. Is my saltwater area too small? No, it's perfect. Maybe they don't like saltwater fish. And then this area, this, whatever this is, building can get deleted. Just totally. Perfect. Perfect. So that is kind of the fishery area. Oh, and then there's got to be a place for the fisher people to live. No, but I guess they don't live there. I guess it's just where the people in the town work, because the town's right here, so they have normal houses that aren't. I mean, every house is, I guess, a normal house, but the houses aren't attached to the work location the way this is, or this is over here. And then over here, we need one farm or something to attach to this right here. And I don't really know, what can I do? So I've got livestock, like cattle. I've got grains and stuff. And then this area, maybe this area can be kind of an organic farm. Like one of those farms and that takes the waste from the fish, like the old fish, and then uses it for the soil as natural fertilizer so that they don't have to pump a bunch of nitrogen into the soil. And then this type of farm is much, much smaller scale, has a lot of different small plots going around it. And the way I can make these small plots is by adding different colored buildings around, and hopefully walls will get constructed between them. But it doesn't look like that's happening right here, so let's do some investigating. See, I don't really understand the process of wall building in this game. What makes walls get built in some places and then not get built in other places? Because these are all different colors. I can verify that. Huh. So they build a wall with the yellow, but not... Do they build a wall with the yellow even when the yellow is far away? No, they don't. Only when it's close. If I make this, will it build a wall? Yes, it will. Huh. What if they're super small buildings like this? The walls disappear. Interesting. Okay, that's what I should do. I should make buildings that are like this. Okay. What if they're similar colors? Like... Huh, so when they're similar colors, the wall doesn't get built between them, but it does get built all this way. That is so interesting. I wonder how that is. Because I would love for there to be a bunch of walls. Crisscrossing, making different tiny little plots for different types of organic food. I forget what it's called, but I know that there's a type of farming where you just grow everything at once and kind of let it grow wild on the same plot of land. And I don't know if that's more efficient, but I guess it's better for the environment. I think the Native Americans used to do it. So let's see. You know, maybe it doesn't make as much sense as kind of an organic farm. We can call it a commune or something, where you have a bunch of different people living near each other and all using the same land and kind of all sharing things. And because it's a commune, I'm going to make the buildings kind of wacky colors. Just because people who work on communes I think of as kind of like quirky, you know? That's enough variation. They're not all totally different colors because maybe they shared the same paint or something. So kind of communistic. They got one big can of red paint and these three people all shared it to paint their houses red. So yeah, that's kind of got a good level of uniformity and variation. And then because they're not going to be producing as much, presumably, no judgment on them, we can make the tower that they ship out of a lot smaller, and we can kind of give it a crazy color. So maybe Maybe they decided to get together and paint it some weird color just because they thought that that would be fun. And the benefit of that is it creates more walls. I can make some kind of historical landmark nearby, like just outside the city, which is going to be here, and it's not really even going to be a city in the first place. I can have a big tower that you can look out from. Excuse me. Whoa, that makes a lot of walls. See, that's exactly what I wanted with the whole commune thing. All these walls and not that many houses. Maybe if I built a big tower, it'll do that. Oh, maybe it builds walls based on the mass of the house. So if your house is really tall, it'll build more walls. So let's test that. That's how many walls that has. Huh. Interesting. Interesting. I'll make a trail. Oh wow, look at that. The presence of that building will make farmland over here, walls over here. What if I delete this? This game makes no sense. There just seemed like there's a couple of sweet spots where you build something and suddenly it's wall central. And then sometimes you build something and no walls ever get built. So let's just say the people in this commune area are very territorial. And so they've totally shut off travel through this side. Maybe they're a cult. Yeah, they're a cult. One time I lived like down the street from a cult. And I also had a shaved head, and so everyone thought that I was in the cult. But I actually was not in the cult, I just had a shaved head. And when I say that everyone thought that I was in a cult, I'm very serious about that. I knew people for like 3 months because I was in a place where I don't usually live. I was in that place for 3 months, and at the end, everybody I was working with was surprised when I told them that I wasn't in a cult. It was like, what? Who did you think that I was? You know? So just to give some more backstory on this, I was working in the city called Pune in India, which is not a very famous city in India, especially just for tourists, because there's not a whole lot there. But there is this thing called the Osho cult, which was in a documentary from Netflix called Wild Wild Country. And they basically poisoned a bunch of people and then got kicked out of the US and had to move back to India. And my apartment was like 2 blocks away from them. And the only white people who were living in India in this city, only white people who were living in this specific city happened to also be cult members. And I was also living like a block away. And so I was working at this engineering firm for 3 months. And at the end of it, everybody who I was working with, or at least the people I talked to, were genuinely surprised that I was not a cult member. So that was a weird experience. So these people are in a cult, and they're just kind of living their life. In the town is afraid of the cult. So they built a big wall here so that they don't have to look at the people who live there. All they can see is the big towers over. Actually, here's the backstory. The people in the cult, they're crazy, and nobody wants to deal with them. And so the town built this big wall so that they don't have to look at or hear the people in the cult doing crazy things. And then the cult decided, no, we want you to see us because we want to, recruit more people. So they built these big towers and put their houses at the top just to spite the people in this town. And the people in the town, they have better things to worry about. They don't feel like spending all this money on building the wall a whole lot higher, so they're just kind of leave it how it is. But now the people in the cult live here and they live up there. But then we have a problem where somehow there's no grass anymore. Okay, good. Problem solved. So maybe the commune is like all the people who got exiled from this religion, and so they are cut off. They are all over here in their own alternative world where they've invented their own religion because for some reason they disagree with the main one. Everybody's kind of building walls to keep these people in. They don't really want to have any contact. Okay, so that's the wall, and then the retreat itself can be a big, colossal building, tall, like a monastery. What do monasteries look like? Let me Google some images. There's Buddhist monasteries, there's Christian monasteries, Hindu, Jain, what's Sufism? Whatever. Investigation for another time. It seems like a lot of these monastery buildings are just big. They're just really chunky, you know? They don't have a lot of ornate sculptures or spires or anything. They're just big, kind of honking residential areas. Residential buildings. So maybe this can be... We can have two kind of residential buildings where people live and reflect on their life and go fishing and talk to nature and stuff. And then there can be some kind of small little chapel over here where they go. Let's make it a different color. This can be a another one of these old features of the city that's this kind of gray color. That's where they can go and kind of reflect and worship individually. And then maybe there's some kind of common building where they make crafts and stuff. Yeah, and then sell them to people to raise money. The bridge can probably be a pretty central feature of the town, a pretty central way for people to get across. So let's move it closer to the middle. Let's build a town hall. Town hall should be the same color as the exterior stones because it's supposed to be kind of an old building. And I want to see if there's a space where I can get a really kind of circular looking building, because I think that's an interesting, unique building type. There's one. There's another. Okay, that should be the town hall. This. Okay, that's where the town hall is. And then I'll have a row of houses next to it. Oh, nice, and these walls will form to kind of make a little quasi-street. Perfect. Maybe my building should be bigger at the middle, so you can kind of see the whole place getting less dense as you go out. It can be like that. And there. Perfect. Now the trick is going to be, can I make another side of the street without walls automatically forming across the street? Let me just say, this is a pretty complicated thing to get it so that the streets don't make walls across. Huh. Something's wrong. Okay, we don't like this. We need bridges, we need walls to get built somewhere else. That's interesting. Yeah, so I guess I can make the bridge start further forward. So you've got one road going to the fishery area, one road going from the bridge into the center of town, and then this road should probably end up at a church maybe, so there can be a church at the end of the street. And now... Alright, so my recording system just stopped basically, so I don't know if it cut off anything, but basically I think that I want this road over here to maybe conclude at a big church, like a big white church, and so I'm in the process of building that now.
But it's a pretty small town, so the church, you know, it's probably pretty humble. That kind of looks too much like the retreat area over there. I should make that smaller. Maybe it should be just a little tower. Yeah, okay, and then this could be a more conventional church type of building. Or you know, well, churches kind of go out like this, right? Where they've got it's kind of a cross shape. Oh, but isn't the cross usually in the other side? Like, isn't the center of the cross supposed to be where kind of the priest is? Kind of embarrassing. I went to church for like 12 years and I don't even know what the architecture is supposed to look like. You know, it should just be like this. Make a church like that. Oops. Okay, I guess that's pretty normal. And then the street will kind of end in that area. And if people want to go further and they want to go over to the monastery place, they can kind of do that on their own. And then this church could probably have a building for the priest to live and a minister to live. What is that called? Anyway, and that could just be a nice building next to it, maybe in line, maybe next door. And then the more colorful buildings, because they want to make a bigger contrast, so I'm going to use pretty colorful buildings on either side. What else could there be in this town? It can't just be a town hall. Maybe I should have the road come through past the town hall. Delete this house right here. Hopefully it'll delete the wall as well. Okay, yeah. So that will go like this. I like the idea of kind of a cavern on the street so that all the buildings kind of have the same typology when you look down, so that they've got this big front side and the back can be whatever they want. So just for consistency, so it looks nice when you look down the street, I'm going to make all the buildings like that. At least to some capacity. Maybe this can be the school. So there can be two kind of school buildings right next to each other. Maybe they're connected. Is that too big for a school in this town? Honestly, it kind of is. Well, that's more normal. Oops. Yeah, that's more normal. Okay. And then the opposite. We can have one kind of culminating building at the end of the road. And what building could that be? Maybe like maybe a hotel. So the hotel is going to be the tallest in this little section of the city because they want the nice views. But I guess there's enough interesting things happening in this town that, like this cult here and the monastery and the little village and all these industries, that it kind of would make sense that it would have a lot of visitors. So yeah. You know, it probably makes sense that the visitors would only be coming recently, which explains why the hotel would be kind of on the outskirts of the town, just because travel was not that common in, you know, medieval times, and so whenever these oldest buildings were built, there wasn't that much travel, but now there is, so the newer buildings have the better technology that's taller and nicer and has better views. And then, should I build another kind of road back here? Maybe not a road, but at least some kind of stable type building or something like that. So this can be like a community center or a dance hall or something. Some place where people go to have community, I guess. Yeah, so I think that I'm pretty much done with making the downtown of this town area. My streets look nice. These four opportunities to go somewhere outside of the or away from the town hall area. And if you want, you can kind of go back towards that community center. And then looking over this, I'm kind of trying to think of things I could add, and I honestly can't think of anything. Maybe a horse stable or something. Okay, so it adds a lot of walls, but I'm honestly not really opposed to that because I think that these rural areas need more walls. You know, it's rare to have just big swaths of land with nothing in them, especially in a smaller agricultural community like this one, where it's not dominated by big like corporate mega farms. Okay, so now I think it's time for a tour of the city. So this is the map from above. You can see it's pretty much the maximum size that I can possibly make it. If I show the grid, it goes pretty much totally to the edge on every way. And then as you get closer, you can see there's different sections. So in the middle, we have this fishery area. That's a fish farm where this main central fish processing area processes the produce that comes from these sections, all these little ponds that are all connected by this waterway leading into the main river over here. And so I'm kind of imagining that there's like different species of fish or whatever in these different sections. And so this fishery is kind of a multi-use type of thing. And then this building here is the bridge connecting the fishery to the mainland. It's right in front of this building here, which is supposed to kind of maintain this is a pretty niche detail here, but I decided I wanted to have at least one section of this water that was shut off from the rest of the water system so that you could have saltwater fish or maybe fish in some other type of heated or whatever special water. And you can see that there is leakage underneath this wall right here, but I'm kind of pretending that it doesn't exist. And then right in the middle is this building that's supposed to kind of maintain that perfect little environment there. And then you've got this bridge going across, leading into the main town area. There's no roads because you can't build roads in this game. You can really only build the absence of houses. And so there's this street that comes down. Right into the middle is the town hall, the main town hall building of the town. And then at that point it splits three ways. One way goes across this bridge here, which I'll talk a little bit about later. The next way goes down this avenue, which ends in a school over here, a small like elementary school or something, schoolhouse type of thing, and this hotel, which is taller than everything else in the town, just so that the guests can have a view of everything. I'm kind of imagining that this is one of those towns that, even though it's a small town with not much of a economy, it still has a pretty good tourist industry, just because people want to visit this town and see the rural lifestyle. And there's probably a lot of historical stuff around here too as well. So then if you go down kind of the central avenue, you pass these houses that have these brick walls between them to kind of define the edge of the street, over to this church here. This church is a pretty big, significant landmark in the town to take it pretty seriously. And then right next to the church is where the minister lives. I forget what that's called, but that's called something special. And then you can kind of go out of the town pretty far and you'll find this monastery area. So this is the monastery itself, where you have two kind of courtyards in the middle of these two buildings, and in the two buildings people live and worship and study and whatever. And then if they want to have some kind of religious experience, they can go into this really tiny little chapel right here. And then this is a kind of a community area where they can gather and make handicrafts or whatever they use to keep the monastery financially afloat. Because I know that a lot of religious organizations that are like this will have some kind of cottage industry out of them that they will sell goods out of to pay for everything else. And then I've got a cult community over here, which I'm kind of imagining is a group that defected from this monastery or this religion over here. And so you've got all these tiny little houses with their own tiny little gardens. Everyone's kind of planting their own organic food, whatever, in these little walled off areas. And then they have these two tall buildings. And kind of my explanation for these tall buildings is that when the monastery split off, the people in the town over here didn't really want to be looking at all these little houses because they didn't want to be reminded of all the whatever miscreants who were in the little cult community, and so they built the wall extra high over here. But then because that kind of offended the cult people who wanted to be taken more seriously and wanted to be seen, they decided to build these two houses on stilts. Maybe they're kind of temples, maybe they're some kind of religious thing, cult thing, but they are a distinctive feature of this cult area over here. And then you can go over to this farm area. It's hard to make a farm because you can't really make fields, you can just make grass, but I'm kind of imagining that this area, this whole open space area, is for wheat or corn or something, some kind of grain, and then this is the building which takes the grain to market, so that people would, or tractors or whatever, wagons would take all of the grain or corn or rice or whatever is being made in this field or grown in this field into this tower. Tower takes it up to the top, the grain elevator, and then into this, I forget what you might call it, but this processing building where it would then get loaded onto boats and then sent through this channel past the fishery area. Importantly, it's isolated from the fish, so it's not getting mixed. The fish aren't getting mixed up in the whatever pollution coming from the shipping, and then that will make its way out into the real world in this direction. And then the last farm building you have is more of a livestock thing. So here is the house, the ranch house. Well, I guess it's not really a ranch. I don't know. And then here is a barn for when you want to put the cattle away in the winter, or sheep or chickens or whatever, some kind of indoor building to house the livestock. And then here is just basically a roof so that you can have horses or something in like a stable, kind of open air, low cost building. And then here is maybe it's a butchery or something, or some kind of meat processing building. Not super large scale because it's not a really large scale farm, but it's something. And then from there, the meat would get loaded into this building here, and then like this building, it is the exit point for all the goods coming out of this farm area. So then similarly to this building in this farm, the livestock would get shipped off on these canals into kind of the real world over here. And then with the cult, they have kind of the same deal where they produce whatever they produce, probably not a whole lot, and then their stuff gets loaded into this area, which then also leads, isolated from the fishery, leads out into the real world. So that is pretty much this community. I haven't really named anything, but it's kind of a lot of different people with a lot of different interests. Shows rural areas are just as varied and just as interesting as urban ones. And so that is this little city. So thank you for staying with me for however long this video was, and I'll make another video soon.